The emergency alert started at 3 in the morning. Admiral Lisa Carter rolled out of bed when her communicator began screaming. She grabbed it with shaking hands, still half asleep. "What is it?" she asked. "Ma'am, you need to get to command right now," came the voice of Lieutenant Ben Sullivan. "We have a situation." Lisa threw on her uniform and ran to the command center. When she arrived, the room was buzzing with activity. Officers were running between stations, pointing at screens and talking in excited voices. "Report," Lisa said. Ben turned to her with wide eyes. "Admiral, we just received a transmission. It's from the USS Meridian." Lisa felt her heart stop. The Meridian had been missing for 15 years. Everyone assumed it was destroyed somewhere in deep space. The ship had left Earth with 200 crew members on an exploration mission. They were supposed to return after 5 years. "Are you sure?" Lisa asked. "Yes, ma'am. The signal is definitely from Captain Jake Morrison. He's requesting permission to dock at Luna Station." Lisa stared at the main screen. There, floating in space near the edge of their solar system, was a ship. But it didn't look like the Meridian she remembered. The vessel was 3 times larger than before. Its hull seemed to shimmer and change color as she watched. Strange patterns of light moved across its surface like living things. "My God," she whispered. "What happened to them?" The communication officer turned around. "Admiral Captain Morrison is requesting to speak with you directly. Put him through." The screen flickered and Jake Morrison's face appeared. Lisa gasped. The man she remembered had been young, maybe 35 years old. This Jake looked older, but not 15 years older. His hair was silver, and there were scars on his face she had never seen before. But his eyes were different. They seemed to glow with an inner light. "Hello, Lisa," Jake said with a smile. "It's good to see you again." "Jake, where have you been? We thought you were dead. What happened to your ship?" "It's a long story. We need to talk. All of us. I need to speak with Earth's leaders and the Galactic Council." Lisa noticed something strange in his voice. It sounded like multiple people were speaking at once, creating a strange echo effect. "Jake, how many people are on your ship?" "About 3,000. 3,000? But you left with only 200? "I know. We made some friends along the way." Before Lisa could ask more questions, her scanner officer called out, "Admiral, you need to see this. The ship's energy readings are off the charts. They're showing power levels higher than our entire defense grid." Lisa looked at the numbers on her screen. The Meridian was producing more energy than should be possible. Their best ships could barely manage 1/10 of what she was seeing. "Jake, what kind of power source are you using?" "Something new." "Don't worry, it's completely safe. Can we dock at Luna Station?" "I need to run security scans first." "Of course. But Lisa, your scans won't work on us anymore. We exist in multiple dimensions now." Lisa didn't understand what he meant, but she ordered the scans anyway. The results made no sense. The ship appeared solid on some sensors but invisible on others. Heat scanners showed it was room temperature, but energy detectors said it was burning hotter than a star. "This is impossible," Ben said, staring at his instruments. The Meridian began moving toward Luna Station. Lisa watched in amazement as the ship seemed to phase through their defensive barriers without setting off any alarms. It was like the shields didn't even know the ship was there. "How are they doing that?" someone asked. "I don't know," Lisa replied. As the ship got closer, more details became visible. The hull wasn't made of any metal Lisa recognized. It looked like it was carved from crystal, but it bent and flexed like living tissue. Sections of the ship seemed to be transparent, showing rooms inside that were bigger than should fit in the space available. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "I'm getting reports from around the galaxy. Every major government is asking about the ship. Word is spreading fast." Lisa nodded. She could imagine the panic this would cause. A human ship with impossible technology would make everyone nervous. The Corvani Empire considered themselves the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They wouldn't like being shown up by humans. The Meridian reached Luna Station and began docking procedures. Lisa watched as the ship's hull seemed to melt and reform around the docking clamps. It was like watching liquid metal, but controlled by intelligence. "Docking complete," came the report. "Open a channel to the station," Lisa ordered. The screen showed the main docking bay of Luna Station. The airlock opened and people began walking out. Lisa counted them as they appeared. There were humans, but also beings she had never seen before. Some were tall and thin, almost transparent, with skin that looked like starlight. Others appeared to be made of living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in impossible ways. A few looked like they might be machines, but they moved with the grace of living creatures, and leading them all was Jake Morrison. He looked around the docking bay and smiled. Then he looked directly at the camera. "Hello, Earth," he said. "We're home." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her that nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was about to become something completely different. She grabbed her communicator and began making calls. The president needed to know. The Galactic Council needed to know. Everyone needed to know that the Meridian had returned, and it had brought friends. As she watched Jake and his impossible crew walk through Luna Station, Lisa couldn't help but wonder what they had found out there in the dark between the stars. And more importantly, what it had done to them. The emergency alert that had woken her up was just the beginning. She could feel it in her bones. The real emergency was just starting. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching through the thick glass as Jake Morrison's crew continued to exit their ship. She had been counting for 2 hours, and people were still coming out. The numbers didn't make sense. The Meridian was big, but not big enough to hold 3,000 beings. "How is this possible?" she asked Ben Sullivan, who stood beside her with a tablet full of readings that made no sense. "I don't know, Admiral. The ship's interior space appears to be larger than its exterior dimensions. That should be impossible." Lisa watched as more strange beings walked through the docking bay. The tall, transparent ones moved like they were floating instead of walking. Their feet barely touched the ground. The crystal creatures made musical sounds when they moved, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral," a voice called from behind her. Lisa turned to see Dr. Amy Brooks walking toward them, but this wasn't the Amy Brooks she remembered. 15 years ago, Amy had been the Meridian's medical officer. She was a small woman with brown hair and kind eyes. The person walking toward Lisa now looked like Amy, but everything about her was different. Amy's eyes glowed with a soft blue light. When she moved, Lisa could see through her for just a moment, as if she wasn't completely solid. And when Amy smiled, Lisa felt a strange warmth in her mind, like someone had just shared a happy memory with her. "Hello, Lisa," Amy said. "It's wonderful to see you again." "Amy, is that really you?" "Yes, though I'm quite different now." "We all are." Lisa studied Amy's face. "What happened to you out there?" "We learned things. Amazing things. Our minds expanded beyond what we thought was possible for humans." Ben stepped forward with his scanner. "Dr. Brooks, may I take some readings?" Amy laughed, and the sound was like music. "Of course, but your instruments won't understand what they're seeing." Ben ran his scanner over Amy. The device immediately started beeping in confusion. Numbers flashed on the screen that made no sense. According to the readings, Amy existed in 17 different dimensions at the same time. "This can't be right," Ben muttered. "Actually, it is," Amy said. "I can see quantum particles with my eyes now. Watch." Amy reached out her hand toward the wall. Instead of touching it, her hand passed through the metal like it was water. She pulled her hand back and the wall was perfectly intact. "How?" Lisa whispered. "Matter is mostly empty space," Amy explained. "Once you understand how atoms really work, you can move between them. It's like learning a new language." A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Amy, are you showing off again?" Lisa turned to see Rick Hayes, the Meridian's former navigator. Like Amy, he looked similar to how she remembered him, but changed. Rick's hair had turned completely white. and his eyes seemed to hold tiny stars inside them. "Rick," Lisa said. "You look different?" "Yes, we all do. The experience changed us in ways we never expected." Ben pointed his scanner at Rick. The readings were just as confusing as Amy's had been. "Rick, how do you navigate now? Do you still use computers?" Rick smiled. "I don't need computers anymore. I can feel the shape of space itself. Watch." Rick closed his eyes and held out his hands. In the air between his palms, a three-dimensional map appeared. It showed their solar system, but with details no human instrument could detect. "Mars is going to have a small solar storm hit it in 3 hours, Rick said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Jupiter's moon Europa has a pod of space whales swimming under its ice. And there's a Corvani spy ship hiding behind our moon right now." Lisa grabbed her communicator. "Command, do we have any unidentified ships in our system?" "Let me check." "Admiral," came the reply. After a moment, the voice returned. "Admiral, we just found a cloaked Corvani vessel behind the moon. How did you know?" Lisa stared at Rick. "How did you do that?" "Space isn't empty," Rick explained. "It's full of information if you know how to read it. The beings we met taught us how to listen to what the universe is saying." More crew members began arriving in the observation deck. Lisa recognized some faces, but they were all changed. Paul Davis, the former security chief, now seemed to be made partly of shadow. When he moved, darkness moved with him like a living thing. "Paul," Lisa said carefully, "what can you do now?" Paul smiled and reached into his pocket. He pulled out what looked like a simple metal rod. But as Lisa watched, the rod began to change. It stretched and twisted, becoming more complex. Within seconds, Paul was holding a device that looked like advanced technology. "I made this from the metals in my pocket," Paul said. "Iron, copper, a few other elements. Once you understand how atoms want to connect, you can convince them to form whatever you need." He handed the device to Ben. "This is a scanner that can see through dimensions. It should help you understand our ship better." Ben took the device with trembling hands. When he turned it on, holographic displays appeared in the air around them. The displays showed the Meridian, but not as a normal ship. It existed in multiple layers of reality at once. "My God," Ben whispered. "Your ship is bigger on the inside, because most of it exists in other dimensions." "Exactly," Paul said. "We learned that reality has many layers. Most people only see one layer, but there are countless others." Lisa felt overwhelmed. "How many of you can do these things?" "All of us," Amy replied. "Every human who made the journey. The abilities are different for each person, but we've all been changed." "What about the non-humans on your ship? Our friends? They're refugees, mostly. Their worlds were destroyed by wars or disasters. We offered them sanctuary." A new being entered the observation deck. This one looked like it was made of living metal, but it moved with grace and purpose. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through trees. "Greetings, Admiral Carter. I am called Harmonic of Distant Stars. I speak for the architects." Lisa had never heard of the architects. "What are the architects?" "We are an old race. Very old. We built great cities among the stars before your species learned to make fire. But our worlds are gone now, destroyed by those who fear change. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. But we have found hope with your people. Humans have a gift that is very rare in the galaxy. You can adapt and grow in ways most beings cannot. This is why the Ancient Ones chose to teach you." "The Ancient Ones?" Amy stepped forward. "The beings who taught us, Lisa. They're older than any civilization we know. They exist beyond normal space and time, and they've been waiting for a species, like humanity, for a very long time." Lisa felt a chill. "Waiting for us? Why?" "Because the galaxy is about to change," Jake Morrison said as he entered the room, "and someone needs to help guide that change." Lisa turned to face her old colleague. Jake looked tired but determined. In his hand, he carried what looked like a sphere of pure light. "Jake, what is that?" "A gift from our teachers. It contains knowledge that will change everything. But first we need to talk to Earth's leaders. And the Galactic Council. They need to understand what's coming. What's coming? Jake looked out the window at the stars. A convergence, Lisa. All the old rules are about to change, and humanity is going to be at the center of it all. Lisa realized that her life, and the life of everyone in the galaxy, was about to become very different. The crew of the Meridian hadn't just returned home. They had returned as something new, something powerful, something that would change everything. And she wasn't sure if that was wonderful or terrifying. The news about the Meridian spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of the ship's return, every major government knew that humanity had gained impossible technology. The reactions were swift and predictable. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room on Luna Station, watching reports come in from across known space. The Corvani Empire had mobilized their science fleets. The Vortan Confederacy was moving battle groups toward human space. Even smaller governments were making emergency calls to their allies. Admiral, Lieutenant Ben Sullivan said, looking up from his communications station. The Galactic Council is demanding an emergency session. They want Captain Morrison to appear before them within 48 hours. Lisa nodded. She had expected this. The galaxy's power structure was built on everyone knowing their place. The Corvani had the best technology. The Vorthons had the strongest military. Humans were supposed to be the newcomers who stayed quiet and followed orders. "What's our status with Earth Command?" Lisa asked. "President Kate Nelson is flying in from Earth. She'll be here in 6 hours. She's bringing the entire cabinet with her." "Good. We'll need them." The door to the war room opened and Commander Steve Rodriguez walked in. Steve had been Jake Morrison's second in command on the Meridian. Like the others, he had been changed by whatever happened in deep space. Steve's most obvious change was his eyes. They were completely black now, like looking into deep space itself. But when he looked at someone, they felt like he could see everything about them, past and future. "Admiral Carter," Steve said with a slight smile. "I thought you should know that we have visitors." "What kind of visitors?" "The kind that don't announce themselves. There are 17 Corvani ships hiding in the outer system. They think their cloaking technology makes them invisible." Ben checked his scanners. "I'm not picking up anything." "Your instruments can't detect them," Steve explained, "but we can feel them. They're trying to study us from a distance." Lisa felt a chill. The Corvani were famous for their advanced science, but they were also known for taking what they wanted. If they thought human technology was too dangerous, they might try to destroy Earth before humanity could use it. "Are they a threat?" Lisa asked. "Not yet, but they're scared. Fear makes people do stupid things." Before Lisa could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. "This is High Commander Zex Corvani of the Imperial Science Fleet," came a cold voice. "We demand immediate access to the human vessel designated Meridian. Refusal will be considered an act of war against the Corvani Empire." Lisa looked at Steve, who just shrugged. "Should I handle this?" "Go ahead." Steve stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Hi, Commander, this is Commander Rodriguez of the Meridian. Your request is denied. You dare refuse the Corvani Empire?" The alien's voice was filled with rage. "We have 17 ships in your system. Surrender the vessel immediately." Steve smiled, and Lisa felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. When Steve spoke again, his voice carried a power that made everyone in the room step back. "High Commander, you have 16 ships in our system. Your lead vessel, the Dominator, suffered a complete power failure 30 seconds ago. Your crew is currently floating in space, wondering why all their technology stopped working." On the main screen, they could see a massive Corvani warship suddenly become visible. It was tumbling slowly through space, completely dark. Ben's scanners immediately picked up the ship. "Admiral, they're broadcasting a distress signal. Complete systems failure." High Commander Zex Corvani's voice came back, but now it sounded worried instead of angry. "What did you do to our ship?" "Nothing permanent," Steve replied. "I simply asked their computer systems to take a nap. Your crew is safe, but I suggest you reconsider your approach." "This is impossible." Corvani technology cannot be affected by external forces. Your technology is based on the idea that consciousness and matter are separate things, Steve explained patiently. Once you understand that consciousness can directly affect matter, many things become possible. Lisa watched in amazement as the dead Corvani ship suddenly came back to life. Its lights turned on and it stopped tumbling. Your systems are restored, Steve said. But High Commander, I want you to understand something. We could have destroyed all 17 of your ships just as easily. We chose not to because we don't want to be your enemies. The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. When the High Commander spoke again, his voice was much more respectful. Commander Rodriguez, what do you want from us? Nothing. We want to help you just like we want to help everyone else in the galaxy. Help us with what? Steve looked at Lisa, who nodded. It was time to tell them the truth. High Commander, are you familiar with the ancient records of your people? The stories about the dark time when your homeworld was attacked? Those are myths, legends from before we achieved spaceflight. No, they're not. 3,000 years ago, something attacked Corva Prime. Your people barely escaped. The attackers consumed your star system and moved on to other targets. Lisa saw fear creep into the High Commander's voice. How could you know about that? Because we met them, Steve said simply, in the deep dark beyond the galactic rim. They're called the Devourers, and they're coming back. The communication channel fell silent. Lisa could imagine the chaos on the Corvani ships as their commanders tried to process this information. Dr. Amy Brooks entered the war room, floating a few inches above the floor. Her presence filled the room with a sense of calm. Steve, are you frightening the Corvani again? She asked with a gentle smile. Just explaining the situation. Amy stepped forward and spoke into the communication system. High Commander, my name is Dr. Amy Brooks. I was the Meridian's medical officer. I know this is difficult to believe, but everything Commander Rodriguez told you is true. Amy gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air above them. The images showed star systems being consumed by massive dark ships. This is what we found in deep space. The Devourers destroyed thousands of civilizations. They're heading toward our part of the galaxy now. High Commander Zex Corvani's voice was barely a whisper. How long do we have? 4 years? Maybe 5, Amy replied. But there is hope. The beings who taught us how to expand our consciousness survived the last attack. They've been waiting for species that could help them prepare for the Devourer's return. What kind of help? We need to work together, Steve said. All of us. Humans, Corvani, Vorthans, everyone. The old way of thinking, where each species fights for dominance, won't work against the Devourers. They feed on conflict and destruction. Lisa heard new alarms sounding. Ben looked up from his station with wide eyes. Admiral, we have incoming. Ships, Vorthan battle cruisers, 12 of them. The main screen shifted to show the new arrivals. The Vorthan ships were massive and heavily armed. They took positions around Luna Station in a classic attack formation. Attention human forces, came a new voice. This is General Thax Vorthan of the Confederate Fleet. You will surrender the alien vessel and submit to Confederacy authority, Steve sighed. And here I thought the Corvani were impatient. Can you handle 12 ships as easily as you handled one? Lisa asked. Probably, but I'd rather not. Violence just makes everything worse. Steve activated the communication system, again. General Thax Vorthan, this is Commander Rodriguez. I assume you've been listening to our conversation with the Corvani? We have. Your claims about ancient enemies are clearly fabrications designed to make us afraid. Then let me show you something that might change your mind. Steve closed his eyes and held out his hands. The space around Luna Station suddenly filled with images, not holographic projections, but actual three-dimensional scenes that everyone could see through their viewports. The images showed the Vorthan homeworld as it existed thousands of years ago. Then they showed massive dark ships arriving and beginning to strip the planet bare. This is the real history of your world, General, Steve said. Your people escaped to colony worlds and rebuilt your civilization, but you forgot where you came from. General Thax Vorthan's voice was shaking. This cannot be real. It is. And unless we work together, it's going to happen again. To all of us. Lisa watched as both the Corvani and Vorthon fleets began, backing away from Luna Station. The display of power had frightened them, but the historical revelations had shaken them to their core. "Hi, Commander General," Amy said gently. "We're not your enemies. We're all facing the same threat. The question is whether we'll face it together or separately." The war room fell quiet as they waited for responses. Lisa realized that the next few moments would determine the future of the galaxy. Would the old enemies become allies, or would fear drive them apart when they needed each other most? 3 days after the confrontation with the alien fleets, Captain Jake Morrison finally agreed to tell the full story. He sat in the main conference room of Luna Station, surrounded by leaders from Earth and representatives from 12 different alien governments. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened to the Meridian during those 15 missing years. President Kate Nelson leaned forward in her chair. "Jake, we need to understand, where did you go? What changed you and your crew?" Jake looked around the room at all the faces watching him. His silver hair seemed to glow under the lights, and his eyes held depths that made people uncomfortable if they looked too long. "It started during our 3rd year in deep space," Jake began. "We were exploring a region beyond the galactic rim, farther than any human had gone before. Our mission was to map new star systems and look for habitable worlds." Dr. Amy Brooks, who was floating in her chair rather than sitting, added, "We were excited. Every day brought new discoveries, new planets, new forms of life, new possibilities for humanity's future. Then we found the barrier," Jake continued. "It wasn't visible to our instruments, but when we tried to cross into a particular region of space, our ship just stopped. Not our engines, not our power systems. The ship itself refused to move forward." High Scientist Vex Corvani, who had joined the meeting by hologram, interrupted. "A force field of some kind?" "No," Jake replied. "Something much stranger. It was like space itself was telling us to wait." Commander Steve Rodriguez stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the stars. "We spent weeks trying to understand what was happening. Our instruments detected nothing unusual, but none of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched." "Watched by whom?" asked General Thaxvorthan, also participating by hologram. "The Primarchs," Amy said softly, though we didn't know that name yet. Jake nodded. "On the 43rd day they made contact. Not through our communication systems, but directly into our minds. All 200 crew members experienced it at the same time." Admiral Lisa Carter, who had been listening quietly, asked, "What did they say?" "They didn't use words," Jake explained. "They shared images, emotions, concepts that our language can't describe. But the basic message was clear. They had been waiting for us." "Waiting for humans specifically?" President Nelson asked. "Waiting for a species with our particular type of consciousness," Steve corrected. "They had been searching the galaxy for thousands of years, looking for minds that could adapt to what they needed to teach." Dr. Amy Brooks gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air above the table. The images showed beings that looked like they were made of pure light, existing in structures that defied normal physics. "The Primarchs exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously," Amy explained. "They gave up physical form long ago to survive the last Great War. They've been hiding in the spaces between normal reality, waiting for the right species to help them." "Help them do what?" Vex Corvani demanded. "Prepare for the return of the Devourers," Jake said grimly. "The beings that destroyed their civilization, and countless others." The images changed, showing massive ships that seemed to be made of living darkness. These ships were consuming stars, turning entire solar systems into fuel for their war machines. "The Devourers aren't just conquerors," Steve explained. "They're parasites that feed on the life force of entire civilizations. They strip planets bare, consume the energy of stars, and use that power to build bigger fleets." "How do you fight something like that?" General Thaxvorthan asked. "You don't fight them," Amy said. "Fighting them with traditional weapons is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. They turn conflict and destruction into more power for themselves." Jake stood up and moved to the center of the room. The Primarchs taught us a different way. They showed us how to expand our consciousness beyond the normal limits of human thinking. What does that mean exactly? President Nelson asked. It means learning to see reality as it really is, Jake explained. Most beings only perceive a tiny fraction of what actually exists. There are layers upon layers of reality, dimensions, folded inside other dimensions, possibilities that most minds can't even imagine. Steve turned from the window. The training took 12 years. 12 years of learning to let go of everything we thought we knew about how the universe works. It was difficult, Amy added. Many times we wanted to give up and come home. Our minds weren't designed to handle that much information, that much possibility. The holographic images shifted again, showing the crew of the Meridian working alongside, the Primarchs in structures that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. But gradually, we began to understand. Jake continued. We learned that consciousness isn't separate from matter. Thought can directly affect reality if you know how to focus it properly. That's how you can do the things we've seen, Lisa realized. Moving through solid objects, creating energy from nothing, reading information from space itself. Exactly. And more importantly, we learned how to teach others. Vex Corvani leaned forward in his holographic projection. You're saying you can teach these abilities to other species? Yes, but only to those who are ready. The process requires giving up many old beliefs about how reality works. It's not easy for most minds to accept. What about the refugees on your ship? General Thax Vorthan asked. The non-human species we've seen? Steve answered. We encountered them during our final years of training. Their worlds had been attacked by scouts from the Devourer fleet. The Primarchs asked us to rescue as many as we could. These species had already begun the consciousness expansion process on their own, Amy explained. The approaching danger from the Devourers triggered something in their minds, a survival response that opened them to new possibilities. Jake returned to his seat. That's when we realized the truth. The Devourers aren't just coming to destroy civilizations. Their approach actually triggers evolutionary leaps in the species they're about to attack. A defense mechanism? President Nelson asked. More than that. It's like the universe itself is trying to create beings capable of stopping the Devourers. But most species don't have enough time to complete the evolution before they're destroyed. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Vex Corvani spoke. You're saying that humanity and these other species are meant to be weapons against the Devourers? Not weapons, Amy corrected gently. Healers. The Devourers became what they are because they chose the path of consumption and destruction. They can be changed back, but only by beings who have learned to exist in harmony with reality instead of trying to dominate it. How do we know this will work? General Thax Vorthan asked. Steve smiled. Because the Primarchs showed us what happened. The last time someone tried it. Another species, in a different part of the galaxy about 50,000 years ago. The holographic images changed one final time, showing a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by ships of impossible design. The dark ships of the Devourers approached, but instead of attacking, they simply stopped. The Transcended Ones successfully converted an entire Devourer fleet, Jake explained. They turned destroyers into gardeners, parasites into protectors. The converted Devourers spent the next 1,000 years restoring the worlds they had previously destroyed. What happened to the Transcended Ones? Lisa asked. They moved beyond physical existence, like the Primarchs. They're still out there somewhere, watching and waiting. President Nelson stood up slowly. Jake, are you telling us that humanity is supposed to become like them? To give up our physical forms? Only if we choose to, Jake replied. The path has many stages. We're still at the beginning. But yes, eventually those who complete the journey will transcend physical limitations entirely. And if we refuse? If we choose to remain as we are? Jake's expression grew sad. Then we'll face the Devourers with traditional weapons and traditional thinking, and we'll lose just like thousands of other civilizations have lost. Admiral Carter asked the question everyone was thinking. How long do we have to decide? The main Devourer fleet will arrive in 4 years, Steve answered. But their scouts are already in our galaxy. They'll reach the outer systems within 18 months. So we have 18 months to convince the entire galaxy to undergo a fundamental change in consciousness? General Thax Vorthan sounded skeptical. We have 18 months to plant the seeds, Amy corrected. The change itself will happen naturally once beings understand what's possible. Fear of the Devourers will accelerate the process, just like it did for us. Jake stood up again and looked out at the stars. The choice is simple but not easy. Evolve or perish. Transcend or be consumed. Work together or die separately. He turned back to face the room full of leaders. The Primarchs are willing to teach anyone who asks, but they won't force the knowledge on anyone. Free will is sacred to them. Where do we start? President Nelson asked. With volunteers, Jake replied. From every species that's willing to try. We'll take them to the deep dark where the Primarchs wait. Those who complete the training will return to teach others. As the meeting continued, Admiral Carter realized that they were planning the biggest change in galactic history, not through conquest or politics but through evolution itself. Humanity, the newcomers to galactic civilization, were Abe. 6 months had passed since the revelation about the Devourers. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had thought possible. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the observation deck of the new Luna Command Center, watching ships from dozens of different species arriving and departing every day. The changes had started slowly. At first, only a few brave volunteers from each species had agreed to travel to the deep dark for training with the Primarchs. The Corvani had sent their best scientists. The Vorthans had sent their most elite warriors. Even smaller governments had chosen their finest minds to make the journey. But then the scouts arrived. 3 months ago, dark ships had appeared at the edge of the galaxy. They moved slowly, methodically, consuming small asteroids and dead planets to fuel their advance. The sight of actual Devourer vessels had ended all doubts about the threat humanity had described. Admiral, Captain Jake Morrison said as he joined her at the observation window. The morning reports are ready. Lisa turned to look at Jake. He continued to change as the months passed. His silver hair now seemed to move by itself, flowing like liquid metal. His eyes held tiny stars, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made people feel calm and hopeful. How many new volunteers today? Lisa asked. 47 ships. Representatives from 19 different species. The training centers in the deep dark are running at full capacity. Lisa nodded. The transformation of the galaxy was accelerating. Every person who completed the consciousness expansion training returned home able to teach others. The knowledge spread like wildfire, changing entire worlds within weeks. What about the resistance movements? Jake's expression grew sad. Still active. The Hegemony Coalition refuses to believe the Devourer threat is real. They think this is all a human plot to take over the galaxy. The Hegemony Coalition was a group of smaller governments that had always resented the power of the major empires. They saw humanity's new abilities as just another form of domination, no different from Corvani technology or Vorthan military might. Are they still trying to attack our ships? Yes, but they can't hurt us anymore. Their weapons pass right through our vessels. We exist in too many dimensions for traditional attacks to affect us. Dr. Amy Brooks floated into the observation lounge, her body now semi-transparent and glowing with soft light. She had progressed further along the consciousness expansion path than most humans. Sometimes she existed in multiple locations at once, teaching different groups simultaneously. Lisa, Jake, she said with a warm smile. I have wonderful news from the training centers. What kind of news? Lisa asked. The first Corvani student has achieved dimensional transcendence. High scientist Vex Corvani himself completed the final stage this morning. Jake smiled. How is he handling it? Better than expected. He said that for the first time in his life, he truly understands what science is supposed to accomplish. Not domination over nature, but harmony with it. Lisa watched as a group of mixed ships prepared to depart for the deep dark. Humans, Corvani, Vorthans, and several other species were traveling together as equals. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. Amy, how many of our people have reached full transcendence now? About 300 from the original Meridian crew. Another 1,000 from the volunteers who joined us in the deep dark. The number grows every day. Commander Steve Rodriguez materialized next to them. He no longer needed to walk through doors. His consciousness could appear anywhere he focused, his attention. "The afternoon briefing is ready," he announced. "We have updates from all sectors." They moved to the command center, where holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Green dots represented worlds that had accepted the consciousness expansion training. Red dots showed Devourer scout positions. Yellow dots marked worlds that were still undecided. "Report," Lisa said. "The Vorthon Confederacy has officially disbanded their military," Steve began. "General Thax Vorthon completed his training last week. He says that beings who understand true reality don't need weapons. What about their defense against the scouts? They don't need traditional defenses anymore. The transcended Vorthons can simply convince the scout ships to sleep until the main fleet arrives." Amy pointed to another section of the display. "The Corvani Empire has begun dismantling their research facilities. They're converting them into consciousness expansion centers. Vex Corvani believes they can train their entire population within 2 years. "That's faster than we hoped," Jake said with satisfaction. Lisa studied the red dots that showed Devourer positions. "How close are the scouts now?" "The nearest ones will reach inhabited systems in 6 months," Steve replied. "But we're ready for them." "Define ready." Jake stepped forward and gestured at the display. The view changed to show the deep dark, where thousands of ships from hundreds of species work together in perfect harmony. "We now have 18 fully operational training centers," Jake explained. "Each one can handle 1,000 students at a time. More importantly, we have over 10,000 fully transcended beings ready to confront the Devourers." "Will that be enough?" "More than enough. The Primarchs estimate that 100 transcended minds working together can convert an entire Devourer fleet. We have 100 times that number." Amy's expression grew thoughtful. "The real question isn't whether we can stop the Devourers. It's what happens afterward." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Once the Devourers are converted back to their original nature, they'll want to help restore what they destroyed. But that process could take thousands of years. Do we stay to help them? Or do we move on to the next challenge?" Steve smiled. "That's a good problem to have." New alarms sounded in the command center. But these weren't warning alarms. They were celebration signals. "What's happening?" Lisa asked. Jake's face lit up with joy. "The first conversion has succeeded. The Devourer scout ship in the Antares system has stopped consuming planets. It's now helping to restore the worlds it damaged." The main display showed images from the Antares system. A massive dark ship that had been stripping a planet bare was now using its power to rebuild the world's ecosystem. Green plants were growing where there had been only ash. "How?" Lisa whispered. "A team of transcended Corvani made contact with the ship's consciousness," Amy explained. "They showed the Devourers what they used to be before fear and hunger consumed them. The ship remembered its original purpose and chose to change." More celebration signals began sounding. Across the galaxy, other scout ships were making the same choice. The conversion process was working better than anyone had dared hope. "This is incredible," Lisa said. "You're actually saving them." "We're all saving each other," Jake corrected. "That's what consciousness expansion really means. Understanding that we're all connected, all part of the same universal story." Over the following weeks, the transformation of the galaxy accelerated beyond all predictions. Entire civilizations chose to abandon their old ways and embrace consciousness expansion. Wars that had lasted for centuries ended overnight, as former enemies discovered they could share thoughts and feelings directly. The Devourer main fleet, when it finally arrived, found a galaxy that welcomed them instead of fighting them. One by one, the massive dark ships chose to remember their original nature. They began using their incredible power to restore destroyed worlds and help new civilizations grow. Lisa found herself promoted to Galactic Coordinator, a position that didn't exist 6 months earlier. Her job was to help coordinate the restoration efforts as former Devourer ships worked alongside transcended beings from hundreds of species. On the first anniversary of the Meridian's return, Lisa stood once again on the observation deck of Luna Station. But now she could see ships that existed in multiple dimensions, beings of pure light working alongside physical creatures, and planets that glowed with renewed life. Jake Morrison appeared beside her, though he spent most of his time now in the deep dark teaching new students. "Any regrets?" he asked. Lisa thought about the question seriously. Humanity had given up its innocence, its simple view of reality. Many humans now existed more in other dimensions than in normal space. Earth itself was becoming a training center for consciousness expansion. But the galaxy was at peace for the first time in recorded history. Entire species that had been extinct were being restored by converted devourer ships. New forms of life were emerging as transcended minds learned to create rather than just discover. "No regrets," Lisa said finally. "This is better than anything we could have imagined." "The Primarchs are proud of humanity," Jake said. "They say we've exceeded even their expectations. We've become teachers of teachers, guides for an entire galaxy." Amy Brooks materialized next to them, now existing as pure consciousness most of the time. "The next phase is beginning," she announced. "We've received contact from another galaxy. They're facing their own devourer crisis." Lisa looked out at the transformed stars and smiled. Humanity had found its true purpose in the universe, not as conquerors or explorers, but as healers and teachers. They had become the species that helped others discover their own infinite potential. The age of conflict was ending. The age of consciousness was just beginning. And at the center of it all, the species that everyone had once considered newcomers to the galactic community had become the architects of.
The stars had always been kind to the Valkyrie people. For 10,000 years they had looked up at the night sky of their homeworld and felt peace. Their planet, Velketh Prime, was a beautiful place of rolling green hills, deep blue oceans, and forests that glowed with soft light when darkness came. The Valkyrie themselves were gentle beings. They stood tall, with skin that produced its own light, a soft glow that changed color with their emotions. Blue meant calm, green meant joy, and when they were afraid, their light would flicker like a candle in the wind. They had joined the Galactic Concord 300 years ago. The Concord was a union of 47 different species from across the galaxy. It promised protection, trade, and friendship. The Valkyrie had believed those promises. They had opened their world to visitors. They had shared their knowledge of plants and medicine. They had trusted that the galaxy would care for them as they cared for others. They were wrong. The sickness came without warning. It started in a small village on the eastern continent. Farmers began to feel tired. Their skin stopped glowing. Within days, they could not stand. Within weeks, they were dead. The bodies did not rot in the normal way. They turned gray and crumbled into dust, as if something had eaten them from the inside. The Valkyrie doctors worked day and night to understand what was happening. They called it the withering, because that was exactly what it did. It made living things wither and die, and it spread fast. One village became 10, 10 became 100. Within 3 months, every continent on Velketh Prime had cases of the withering. Elder matriarch Silvara was the leader of the Valkyrie people. She was old, wise, and deeply loved by her kind. Her skin glowed with a steady purple light, the color of wisdom and authority. When the withering began, she did everything a leader could do. She ordered quarantines within cities. She sent her best scientists to study the disease. She prayed to the old gods of her ancestors. But nothing worked. The withering was unlike any sickness the Valkyrie had ever seen. It did not care about quarantines. It spread through the air, through water, through touch. Their medicines were useless against it. Their prayers went unanswered. So Silvara did what any member of the Galactic Concord would do. She called for help. Her first message went to the Dominion, the most powerful species in the Concord. They had great ships and advanced technology. Surely they would send aid. The response came 3 days later. It was short and cold. The Dominion acknowledges the medical emergency on Velketh Prime. However, due to the unknown nature of the pathogen, we cannot risk contamination of Dominion space. All travel between Dominion systems and Velketh Prime is hereby suspended. We wish you well in your efforts. Silvara read the message twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. They were not coming. The most powerful species in the galaxy was not coming to help. She sent another message, this time to the Rathani Collective. The Rathani were famous for their medical knowledge. They had cured diseases that other species thought were impossible to cure. Their response was the same: too dangerous, too risky. They could not help. One by one, Silvera sent messages to every species in the Galactic Concord. 47 messages. 47 pleas for help. She begged. She offered trade agreements. She promised anything they wanted. 47 species said no. Some were polite about it. They expressed sadness and offered their thoughts. Others were blunt. They told the Valkyrie that their planet was already lost and that sending help would be a waste of resources. A few did not bother to respond at all. The Galactic Concord held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation on Velketh Prime. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the Great Hall of the Concord Station, a massive space station at the center of civilized space. They talked for hours about the withering. Scientists presented data. Military leaders discussed containment options. Politicians argued about responsibility. In the end, they made a decision. Velketh Prime would be quarantined. No ship would be allowed to land on the planet or leave it. Warning beacons would be placed around the entire system. Anyone who tried to break the quarantine would be arrested or destroyed. The planet and its 3 billion inhabitants would be sealed off from the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Threlvox of the Dominion made the announcement. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were black and showed no emotion as he spoke. The Galactic Concord has determined that the pathogen on Velketh Prime poses an unacceptable risk to galactic civilization. In order to protect the greater population, we are implementing a full planetary quarantine. We understand that this decision is difficult, but it is necessary. The needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few. He paused and looked directly at the recording device that would send his words across the galaxy. To the people of Velketh Prime, we are sorry. We hope that you find a way to survive this crisis. But we cannot risk the lives of trillions to save billions. This is the way of things. The message ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and accepted the decision. It was logical, they told themselves. It was necessary. The Velkari were unfortunate, but sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. On Velketh Prime, Silvara watched the message with her council. The room was silent. The light from their skin had faded to almost nothing, a sign of deep despair. "They are leaving us to die," said Councillor Velthos, a young male who had always believed in the goodness of the galaxy. "They are just going to watch us die." "We knew this was possible," said another councillor, an old female named Draseth. "The Concord has always valued order over compassion. We should not be surprised." Surprised? Velthos stood up, his skin flickering with orange light, the color of anger. 3 billion of our people are sick and dying. We have been loyal members of the Concord for 3 centuries. We have given them medicine, food, and friendship. And now they throw us away like garbage? Silvera raised her hand, and the room fell silent. She was tired, so very tired. The withering had not reached the capital city yet, but it was only a matter of time. Every day the reports grew worse. Entire regions were going dark as their populations died. "What would you have me do?" she asked softly. "I have begged every species we know. I have offered everything we have. They do not care. To them, we are already dead." She looked at the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the capital. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. And soon there would be no one left to see it. "Perhaps this is our fate," Silvara said. "Perhaps the Velkari were always meant to fade away." "No," Councillor Velthos shook his head. "I refuse to accept that. There must be someone out there who will help us, someone who is not afraid." "Who?" Draseth laughed bitterly. "We have contacted everyone. Every species in the Concord has abandoned us. There is no one left." "What about the humans?" Velthos asked. The room went quiet. The humans were the newest species in the galaxy. They had only been part of galactic civilization for 30 years. Their homeworld, called Earth, was on the far edge of known space. They were considered primitive by most standards. Their ships were slow. Their technology was old. They were tolerated by the Concord but not respected. The humans? Drosseth shook her head. What could they possibly do? They barely have a dozen colonies. Their military is tiny. They have no real power in the Concord. But they are different, Velthos insisted. I have studied them. They do not think like the other species. They have strange customs. They help each other even when it makes no sense. They rush into danger to save strangers. They are emotional, yes, but they are also brave. Silvera considered this. She had met a human once, years ago, at a Concord gathering. He was a scientist named James who studied alien plants. She remembered thinking how strange he was. He smiled too much. He asked too many questions. He seemed genuinely interested in her people, not because they could offer him anything, but simply because he was curious. At the time, she had found it odd. Now she wondered if that oddness might be their last hope. Send a message to the humans, Silvara said finally. Tell them everything. Tell them we are dying and that no one will help us. I do not expect anything. But if there is even a small chance, the message was sent that night. It traveled across the vast distances of space, passing through relay stations and communication networks, until it reached a small listening post on the edge of human space. 3 days later, a response came. Silvera was in her chambers when the communication officer burst through the door. The young Valkyrie was breathing hard and his skin was glowing bright green, the color of joy. Matriarch, you must see this! He handed her a datapad. On it was a message from the human government, something called the United Nations of Earth. It was short, but every word burned with meaning. We have received your message. We have seen what the Concord has done. We do not accept their decision. We are sending a ship with medical personnel, supplies, and scientists. They will arrive in 22 days. Hold on, help is coming. Silvara read the message 3 times. Her hands were shaking. Tears fell from her eyes, something that had not happened in decades. They are coming, she whispered. The humans are coming. The news spread across Velketh Prime like wildfire. For the first time in months, the Velkari had hope. Their skin began to glow again. They looked up at the stars and waited. 22 days felt like an eternity. Every morning, Silvera checked the sensors, looking for any sign of the human ship. Every night she prayed that they had not changed their minds. The withering continued to spread. More cities fell dark. More Velkari died. The population had dropped from 3 billion to 2.5 billion. Time was running out. On the 21st day, the sensors detected something. A ship was approaching Velketh Prime. It was ignoring the quarantine beacons. It was ignoring the warnings. It was coming straight for them. The ship was unlike anything the Velkari had seen before. It was not elegant like Dominion vessels. It was not smooth like Rathani ships. It was angular and rough, covered in thick armor plates and painted with letters the Velkari could not read. It looked like it had been built for war, but it carried no visible weapons. On its side was a symbol, a blue circle with green and brown inside it. The Velkari would later learn that this was an image of Earth, the human homeworld. The ship entered orbit around Velketh Prime and sent a transmission. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Nations Spaceship Compassion. We are here to help. Please provide landing coordinates. Silvera gave the coordinates herself. She watched from the balcony of the Capitol building as the human ship descended through the clouds. It landed in the great plaza at the center of the city, sending up clouds of dust and leaves. A ramp lowered from the ship. Silvara walked forward, her council behind her. Her skin glowed with a color no Velkari had shown in generations, bright, shining gold. The color of hope. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It was a human female. She was shorter than Silvera expected, with dark hair and brown skin. She wore a uniform of blue and white, and her face was set with determination. Behind her, dozens of other humans emerged, carrying cases and equipment. Captain Vasquez walked down the ramp and stopped in front of Silvara. For a moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other. One was ancient and wise, her species on the edge of extinction. The other was young and fierce, from a species that the galaxy considered children. Elder Matriarch Silvara, Elena said. Her voice was steady and strong. I am Captain Elena Vasquez. I bring greetings from the people of Earth. Captain, Silvara replied, her voice trembling. You have come. Despite everything, you have come. Why? Your people barely know us. You owe us nothing. Why would you risk everything to help strangers? Elena smiled. It was a warm smile full of kindness and fire. Because that is what humans do, she said. We do not turn away from people in need. We do not calculate the value of life. We do not abandon those who are suffering. She stepped forward and took Silvera's hands in her own. You sent a message to the stars asking for help. Every other species in the galaxy looked away. But we heard you, and we are here. She raised her voice so that everyone in the plaza could hear her. We are humanity. We do not abandon people. We are with you. The Velkari in the plaza began to glow. Blue and green and gold, their light filled the air like a sunrise. For the first time in months, they did not feel alone. For the first time in months, they believed they might survive. Silvara looked at the human captain, this small, fierce creature from a young world, and she understood something that the ancient species of the galaxy had forgotten. Power was not about technology or wealth or armies. Power was about the willingness to stand up for others. Power was about compassion, and the humans, for all their primitive ways, had more power than anyone in the galaxy had ever imagined. The stars had abandoned the Velkari, but the humans had come, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The first night on Velketh Prime was long and difficult. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the landing ramp of the Compassion and looked out at the alien city. It was beautiful in a way she had never seen before. The buildings were made of a material that looked like crystal, and they glowed softly in the darkness. The trees and plants also produced light, creating a world that never truly went dark. But there was something wrong. Elena could feel it in the air. The city should have been full of life and activity. Instead, it was quiet, too quiet. Many of the buildings were dark. The streets were empty. The Velkari who had gathered to greet them had gone back to their homes, and now only a few soldiers remained to guard the plaza. Commander Marcus Okonkwo walked up beside her. He was her second in command, a tall man with dark skin and kind eyes. He had served with Elena for 10 years, and she trusted him more than anyone else in the universe. The medical teams are setting up in the building the Velkari gave us, he said. Dr. Tanaka wants to start taking samples first thing in the morning. Elena nodded. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the best xenobiologist in the human fleet. She was small and quiet, but her mind was sharper than any weapon. If anyone could understand the withering, it was her. How bad is it? Elena asked. Marcus was silent for a moment. Bad, he finally said. The Velkari have lost 500 million people already. The disease is spreading faster than they can track it. Their medical facilities are overwhelmed. They have been burning bodies just to keep up. Elena closed her eyes. 500 million. It was a number too large to really understand. Back on Earth, that would be the entire population of several countries. All those lives, all those families just gone. And the Conquered is really doing nothing? She asked, even though she already knew the answer. Nothing, Marcus confirmed. They have ships watching from outside the system, making sure no one leaves. They are treating this planet like a prison. Elena felt anger rise in her chest. She had read the official statements from the Galactic Concord. They talked about containment protocols and acceptable losses and the greater good. They used big words to hide a simple truth. They were letting 3 billion people die because saving them was too hard. We are not like them, Elena said quietly. We will never be like them. No, ma'am, Marcus agreed. We will not. The next morning, the work began in earnest. Dr. Tanaka and her team of 50 scientists spread out across the city, collecting samples and studying patients. They wore full protective suits, not because they were afraid, but because they did not want to risk carrying the disease back to human space. Every precaution had to be taken. Elena spent the day meeting with Elder Matriarch Silvara and her council. They showed her maps of the planet, explaining where the withering had hit hardest. They shared all their research, all their data, everything they had learned in months of fighting the disease. It was not much. The Velkari were skilled healers, famous across the galaxy for their knowledge of organic medicine. But the withering was unlike anything they had ever faced. Their treatments did nothing. Their medicines were useless. The disease simply ignored everything they tried. "We have been fighting for 6 months," Silvara said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We have lost 200 of our best doctors to the withering. They stayed with their patients until the end. That is our way. We do not abandon those in our care." Elena looked at the old matriarch with new respect. The Velkari were dying, but they had not stopped fighting. They had not stopped caring for each other. In that moment, Elena knew that she had made the right choice coming here. "We will find a way," Elena promised. "I do not know how yet, but we will not leave until we do." Silvera's skin flickered with soft blue light. "Why?" she asked. "I asked you before, and you gave me a beautiful answer. But I need to understand. Your people are young. You have so much to lose. Why would you risk everything for us?" Elena thought about the question carefully. It was a fair question, and it deserved a real answer. "Do you know the history of my species?" Elena asked. Silvera shook her head. "I know only a little. You come from a small planet called Earth. You have been traveling the stars for less than 200 years. "That is right," Elena said. "And in those 200 years, we have learned many things. But the most important thing we learned long before we ever left our planet." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans have a complicated history. We have done terrible things to each other. Wars, slavery, cruelty of every kind. For thousands of years, we hurt each other again and again. But we also learned something. We learned that the only way to survive was to help each other. When one village suffered, the villages around it would send food. When one nation faced disaster, other nations would send aid. We learned that compassion was not weakness. It was strength." Elena walked to the window and looked out at the glowing city. "When we finally reached the stars, we thought we would find species who had learned the same lesson. We thought the galaxy would be full of beings who understood that helping each other was the only way to truly thrive. Instead, we found the Concord, a union of species who calculate the value of life like it is a trading good, who abandon those in need because saving them is too expensive or too risky." She turned back to Silvara. "We refuse to become like them. We refuse to forget what we learned on Earth. If we let you die without trying to help, we would lose something more important than ships or trade deals. We would lose who we are." Silvara was silent for a long moment. Then she rose from her seat and walked to Elena. She was much taller than the human captain, but somehow in that moment, they seemed equal. "Your species is very strange," Silvera said softly, "but perhaps strange is exactly what this galaxy needs." The days turned into weeks. The human teams worked without rest, studying the withering from every possible angle. Dr. Tanaka barely slept, spending long hours in the laboratory, surrounded by samples and data. The withering was a mystery. It attacked the cells of living creatures and broke them down from the inside. But it was not a normal virus or bacteria. It was something else, something artificial. The more Tanaka studied it, the more convinced she became that someone had made this disease on purpose. "It is too perfect," she explained to Elena one evening. "Natural diseases have weaknesses. They make mistakes. They evolve in random ways. But the withering is different. It is designed to kill. Every part of it works together like a machine." "A bioweapon," Elena said grimly. "Yes, but not a recent one. Based on the structure, I believe this weapon is thousands of years old. Maybe older." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "If it is that old, why has no one ever developed a cure?" Tanaka shook her head. "I do not know. Perhaps the species who created it wanted to make sure there would never be a cure. Or perhaps—" She paused, a dark look crossing her face. "Perhaps someone in the Concord knows about this disease and chose not to share that knowledge." The thought was disturbing. Elena did not want to believe that the Concord would hide information that could save lives. But the more she saw of galactic politics, the less surprised she would be. Meanwhile, the situation on Velketh Prime continued to get worse. The withering had reached the capital city. Every day, more Velkari fell sick. The hospitals were overflowing. The cremation fires burned day and night. The human medical teams did what they could. They could not cure the withering, but they could make the sick more comfortable. They brought pain medication and clean water. They sat with dying patients and held their hands. They gave the Valkyrie something that no one else in the galaxy had offered: simple human kindness. Word of the humans spread across the planet. Stories were told of these strange creatures who had crossed the galaxy to help strangers, who wore clumsy suits and spoke with odd accents but never stopped working, who cried when their patients died and celebrated when they got better, who treated every Valkyrie life like it was precious. The Valkyrie began calling them the Light Bringers. It was the highest honor their culture could give to outsiders. But not everyone was happy about the human presence on Velketh Prime. 3 weeks after the Compassion landed, a fleet of Dominion warships arrived at the edge of the system. There were 12 of them, each one larger than any ship humanity had ever built. They took position around the quarantine zone and waited. Then the message came. Ambassador Threlvox appeared on the communication screen of the Compassion. His four-armed form was rigid with authority, his black eyes cold. "Captain Vasquez," he said, his voice flat and dangerous, "you have violated the quarantine protocols established by the Galactic Concord. You have entered a restricted zone without permission. You have put galactic civilization at risk. The Concord demands that you withdraw immediately." Elena stood in front of the screen, her arms crossed. Behind her, her bridge crew watched in tense silence. "Ambassador Threlvox," Elena replied, "we have received your demand. We refuse." For a moment, Threlvox seemed surprised. He was not used to being refused. The Dominion was the most powerful species in the Concord. When they gave orders, others obeyed. "You refuse," he repeated. "Perhaps you do not understand the situation, Captain. Those ships outside your system are warships. They are fully armed and ready for combat. If you do not withdraw, we will be forced to take action." "Then take action," Elena said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "But know this, we are not here to fight. We are here to save lives. Every hour you spend threatening us is an hour we could be helping the Valkyrie. Every ship you send to intimidate us is a ship that could be carrying medicine and supplies. You want to stop us? Fine. Destroy us. Blow our ship out of the sky. But you will have to explain to the entire galaxy why you murdered doctors and scientists who were trying to help." Threlvox was silent for a long moment, his four hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "You are making a mistake," he finally said. "The Conquered will not forget this. There will be consequences for your species." "I am sure there will be," Elena agreed. "And when those consequences come, we will face them. But we will face them with clean hands and clear consciences. Can you say the same, Ambassador?" She ended the transmission. The bridge was silent. Then slowly, Commander Okonkwo began to applaud. The rest of the crew joined in. Elena allowed herself a small smile, but inside she was worried. She had just challenged the most powerful species in the galaxy. She had put her ship, her crew, and possibly her entire civilization at risk. But she had also done the right thing, and that had to count for something. 2 days later, word came from Earth. The United Nations had held an emergency session to discuss the situation. Representatives from every nation had gathered to debate whether humanity should continue to support the mission to Velketh Prime. The Conquered had already begun its punishment. Human trading ships were being turned away from galactic ports. Contracts were being canceled. Colonies that depended on galactic trade were starting to feel the pressure. The debate was fierce. Some argued that humanity could not afford to anger the Concord. They were too small, too weak, too young. They should withdraw from Velketh Prime, apologize, and try to rebuild their relationship with the galactic community. But others disagreed. They spoke about human values and human dignity. They talked about the lessons of history, about the times when nations had stood by and watched atrocities happen because getting involved was too difficult. They said that if humanity abandoned the Valkyrie now, they would be no better than the species who had already turned their backs. In the end, the vote was not even close. "We stay," the Secretary General of the United Nations announced. "Whatever the cost, we stay. We will not abandon people in need. That is not who we are." When Elena heard the news, she went to her quarters and cried, not from sadness, but from pride. She had always believed in humanity, but sometimes it was hard to keep that faith. Sometimes the darkness of the universe made her wonder if compassion could ever truly win. Now she had her answer. Her people had looked at the threats and the consequences and the pressure from the greatest powers in the galaxy, and they had said no. They had chosen to be good, even when being good was hard. She wiped her eyes and returned to work. There was still a disease to cure, still lives to save. The galaxy might be against them, but humanity was just getting started. And somewhere in the laboratory, Dr. Tanaka was looking at her samples with new determination. The answer was there, hidden in the cells and molecules of the withering. She just had to find it. The race against time continued, but for the first time, hope was winning. The Great Hall of Concord Station was the largest room ever built in the galaxy. Its ceiling reached so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were made of a metal that had been mined from the core of a dead star. Every surface was covered in symbols and flags representing the 47 species of the Galactic Concord. At the center of the hall stood a circular platform where the Council of Species met to decide the fate of worlds. Today, the platform was crowded with representatives from across the galaxy. They had come to discuss a problem that was quickly becoming a crisis: the human problem. Ambassador David Chen stood alone on one side of the platform. He was a small man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had been humanity's representative to the Concord for 15 years, longer than any other human diplomat. He had learned to navigate the complex politics of galactic civilization. He had made friends and enemies. He had fought for human interests at every turn, but he had never faced a challenge like this. On the other side of the platform stood the representatives of the most powerful species in the Concord. Ambassador Threlvox of the Dominion was there. His forearms crossed over his chest, his black eyes fixed on Chen with cold hatred. Beside him stood Ambassador Valrine of the Rathani Collective, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes that never blinked. There was Ambassador Krog of the Melithian Empire, a massive creature covered in thick armor plates, and Ambassador Sethus of the Vorn Hegemony, whose body seemed to be made entirely of flowing shadows. They were the Big Four, the species that truly controlled the Galactic Concord. For centuries, they had made the rules that everyone else followed. They were not happy that a young, primitive species was challenging their authority. "We have gathered today to address a violation of Concord law," Threlvox began, his voice echoing through the Great Hall. "The human species has broken our quarantine protocols. They have entered a restricted zone. They have put all of galactic civilization at risk. This cannot be allowed to stand." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Most of the smaller species were afraid to disagree with the Dominion. They had seen what happened to those who challenged the Big Four. "Ambassador Chen," Threlvox continued, turning his cold gaze to the human, "you have been given the opportunity to explain your species' actions. Speak now." David Chen stepped forward. He was surrounded by hostile faces, standing alone